next on WWL-TV Channel 4.
His name is Rogério. Painted with the cinders of his heritage, following his father's path of fire. He is burning yesterday. He is burning tomorrow. His fire is small, but when joined by thousands of others, its smoke casts a shadow on the world. From above, she is a gigantic, beautiful emerald. In the language of the Amazon, she is Casa Verde, mansions green, a combination of insects and plants and reptiles beyond imagination. But why should anyone be interested in such an exotic and distant place? Well, in this world, the reasons are many. An area of the forest larger than the state of Louisiana is being destroyed every year. And with that destruction comes the loss of natural medicines.
This can be used to apply to the fungus, which attacks the skin, and it causes the fungus to disappear after about 3 weeks.
The loss of lumber. The loss of food products. And the loss of thousands of animal and plant species. And predicted environmental problems, ranging from the heating of the Earth's atmosphere to a rise in sea levels. Most rainforests are found in a belt around the middle of the Earth. From Southeast Asia to Africa to Brazil. They are called the lungs of the Earth, for they literally take in carbon dioxide and convert it to oxygen. Mother Nature's incredible filter that cleanses the air we breathe. The Amazon forest, which covers most of Brazil, is the world's largest remaining rainforest. Millions of years old, it has produced many miracles and surely hides many more. Mark Plotkin is an ethnobotanist from New Orleans. Plotkin was literally dropped alone into the forest in 1982, where he spent years learning the language and medicines of remote Amazonian tribes.
Do you pick in loud and you
Is you cut the mail?
그래.
A significant proportion of the medicines we use come from the plant kingdom. About 25% of prescription medicines contain materials derived from plants, and a significant proportion of those medicines were extracted from tropical plants.
Now with Conservation International, he still searches for plants, leaves, roots, and liquids that can be used to cure sickness.
Most of the chemicals extracted from plants that are used in medicines can be synthesized, but interestingly enough, in many cases, it's cheaper just to extract it from the plants. Plants are, in fact, complex chemical factories that produce these things often at a fraction of the cost. Why produce them in a lab if it's going to cost more over the counter at K&B if we can extract it from the wild and get it at a lower price?
From the forest, ethnobotanists have found curare. First used as a poison on hunters' arrow tips, it is now used in operating rooms as a muscle relaxant. Rosie Periwinkle gave us 6 anti-cancer drugs, including a treatment for childhood leukemia. Extracts of the ipecac tree are used to treat dysentery. The well-known papaya tree provides a drug used to treat slip disc. A tropical yam yields cortisone, which is used by arthritis. And the bark of the chichona tree gives us quinidine, which is now used to regulate heart rhythms. Many of these are an example of Mother Nature creating a defense system which man uses to his benefit.
A good example is this tree. If you cut into the bark and the sap flies into your eye, you're blinded. But by the same token, if you use that sap the way the natives do, it cures intestinal parasites.
This 70-year-old native of the forest injured his foot while crossing a log. Years ago, his ancestors discovered that a special leaf from the rainforest would reduce the swelling associated with this type of wound. Unfortunately, only 2% of the plant species in the rainforest have been investigated for their medicinal capabilities. That means there are thousands of other plants that may hold the cure for everything from AIDS to multiple sclerosis. But those cures may never be found because of the destruction of the rainforest. Few argue with the fact that if the destruction is at least not slowed, ramifications for Louisiana and the world are rather frightening. The greenhouse effect. Because of the burning of fossil fuels by industry and automobiles, our atmosphere is becoming inundated by carbon dioxide. Now, 10 to 20% of that pollutant is being created by the burning of the rainforest. These gases are being trapped by our Earth's atmosphere. And as in a greenhouse, the Earth's temperature is rising, thus the so-called greenhouse effect. It is a phenomenon that could affect crops, shift rainfall patterns, and through the melting of polar ice caps, raise the levels of oceans. Worldwide predictions put the rise in sea levels of 3 to 5 feet in 40 years. That means that large sections of South Louisiana would literally go underwater, resulting in the loss of seafood, real estate, and transportation. Estimates of a 2-degree temperature rise and changes in rainfall patterns could eliminate many of Louisiana's agricultural crops. If weather changes occur in Brazil alone, Louisiana's economy could be affected. The New Orleans port now brings in more than $200 million a year through imports such as coffee, cocoa, tea, meats, wood products, and rubber from Brazil. As the forest dies, so do the imports. Death in the forest is not an isolated event. In fact, it is part of a complex wheel of connections to the world. When the dinosaurs were eliminated, the wheel did not collapse. When we eliminated the passenger pigeon, the wheel did not collapse. But when nearsightedness is replaced with scientific farsightedness, experts predict that if we eliminate the buffalo, the whale, the elephant, or even just one of thousands of species of plants in the rainforest, somewhere along the line, if one spoke too many is removed, man may be included in what has already happened twice in geological history: total extinction.
The Louisiana Land and Exploration Company, LL&E, is deeply concerned about the rapid loss of our nation's largest and most productive nursery grounds for aquatic life, the wetlands of the Mississippi River Delta. 35 years ago, LL&E began an intense wetlands conservation program to save our land from saltwater intrusion and coastal erosion. In spite of early and ongoing battles to stem the tide, LL&E, along with everyone else, is losing the war with nature. Before daybreak, several more acres of our wetlands will vanish. Incredibly productive habitat for fish, birds, and wildlife. As rainforests give us ozone, wetlands are essential to the food chain. For more information on our disappearing wetlands, call us at LL&E.
LL&E, preserving and enhancing our most important resources.
B97's Walton and Johnson.
$10,000.
To understand what's happening to the inhabitants of the forest, one must understand what's happening in Brazil. A little larger than the continental United States, it is a developing industrial nation with a wealth of mineral resources, but also with a staggering national debt. For decades, growth was limited to the coastal regions of the country. Those cities became crowded, with many people living in poverty. The teeming crowds pushed government officials to launch a grand scheme in the middle of the century.
In 1956, the Brazilian government literally parachuted workers into this barren region for the sole purpose of moving people into the vast, unused center of the country. In 5 short years, the city of Brasilia was born, a city that now has over 1 million residents.
The very existence of Brazil's capital city demonstrates this country's desire to grow. Architects envisioned a city of the future. An underground cathedral is a well-known landmark. Government buildings seem to be floating islands. Sculptured forms actually house the nation's Congress. Multi-lane highways carry Brazilian-made cars running on alcohol. And strict zoning keeps business, residences, and government separate. All this with no slums. At least that was the plan. Reality doesn't look quite so good. A beautiful lake surrounding the city is totally polluted. And the slums that would not be, now are. The poor and the debt are often given as the reason the officials in Brasilia decided to push further into the nation's interior.
This is the infamous BR-364. In the 1970s, the Brazilian government built this road with the express purpose of developing the Amazon. But thus far, the dream has not come true. When workers first arrived, rainforest, as far as the eye could see. But today, in many places, this is the Amazon.
The road cuts through the Brazilian state of Rondônia. Slash and burn became the cry heard round the world. Government officials looked upon the Amazon as the United States looked to the Wild West, thousands of square miles of virgin territory. A place to lure slum dwellers who were packing the cities. Among them was Rogerio's family. His father came here 6 years ago when he lost his job in Rio. Rogerio and his older brother helped burn 20 acres of rainforest to raise sugarcane and some cattle. Even though his whole family has suffered with malaria, he feels they are better off here because they have land.
Okay, we copy that.
The fires from Rogerio's farm were no doubt among those seen by Space Shuttle astronauts last October as they took these pictures from orbit above South America. What you see is not a cloud. It is dense smoke covering Rondônia and its neighboring states.
The biggest things that we've seen are things like deforestation. We've seen erosion. We've seen some land usage that kind of disturbs us. And I think that it's a good lesson as we take back these photos to men on Earth in their respective countries to make sure that they take care of what nature has given them and to make sure that it's used wisely.
You have potentially a tremendous source of trace gases to the atmosphere.
NASA biologist Jim Tucker uses satellite technology to track what has happened in Rondônia.
Here we're looking at a tremendous cloud of smoke about 100 by 300 miles over the Brazilian state of Rondônia, and the smoke has originated from about 2,500 fires that are actively burning at this time.
On this one day?
On this one day, at this one specific time, within this state.
It's estimated that in just the past 15 years, more than 20% of Rondônia's forest has become cattle ranches and farmland.
What is troubling to me as a biologist in this situation is you have a tremendously rapid process of habitat fragmentation over large areas, and in almost any example, be it the American West or other parts of the world, you have never had these rapid transformations of forested areas into other uses in this short period of time.
The blue, green, and gold colors of the Brazilian flag represent the environment of the nation. Another development that has followed Highway 364 has put those colors into conflict.
And the irony is the incredible beauty of Brazil, the green of the trees, the blue of the sky, is being threatened. Threatened by the gold.
The dredging of gold on the bed of Amazon River tributaries. Thousands of such barge operations are adding to a siltation problem that is affecting fish production and water quality. But that's the least of it. Workers who are fighting for the chance to share in tremendous gold profits are endangering themselves and the environment. They use mercury in a crude refining process to bind the flakes of gold into cakes, which are heated with torches. Workers breathe the mercury vapors.
They are afraid of the smoke because it makes them feel dizzy, okay? Their stomach, okay, they feel bad with the smoke.
The mercury also enters the streams and is ingested by fish, a staple in the Brazilian diet. The fingers of mercury also reach beyond man and fish. The rivers of the Amazon regularly push over their banks into the forest. Spreading mercury to plants that Brazilian farmers are beginning to harvest and market. Brazilian scientists are only now becoming aware of the extent of the environmental hazard.
And here is the percent of samples that have mercury over the limit established by the World Health Organization.
Wow.
And so you can see
So you get
the
43%,
percentage.
50%, 64%, 32%,
different places.
60%, and that's over what the world recognizes as a tremendous problem.
Yes.
Some of these are 100%.
100%.
Yamadas fears that Brazil is on the verge of seeing numerous birth defects caused by mercury poisoning. Determining the extent of the problem will require more money from the government or foreign health service organizations. Yamadas' warning is part of a new awareness of the environmental hazards of deforestation. Brazilian development has been the target of criticism from the international level and from a growing environmental movement within the country. A movement spurred on by the murder of Chico Mendes, a rubber tappers union leader who tried to stop ranchers from turning the forest into grazing lands. The criticism has been aimed not only at the Brazilian government, but also at outside big money investors. The World Bank financed the Highway 364 project that led to the rainforest destruction. Bank officials say that project taught a lesson.
We all learn, at least I hope we do, and there's been a great deal of evolution in the United States as well as in developing countries and in public consciousness and in the consciousness of institutions all over the world. It's been a great increase in knowledge in the time since that loan was made.
Yet the bank is still planning to fund several hydroelectric dams that will flood forests and displace Amazonian Indians. This even though dams built in the rainforest have been disappointing power generators because erosion silts up the basins and reduces power output. The World Bank is refusing, however, to finance another major threat to the rainforest, a western extension of Highway 364. But Japan may pick up the tab for that project because it wants to import tons of logs from the western Amazon. New environmental forces in Brazil, led by Congressman Fabio Feldman, are using such projects to make a case against deforestation.
We are destroying the forest without any benefit for the Brazilian society. This is the most important. This is the key point. We are not having a real project of development of this region. We are destroying because there are few people that are gaining some benefits instead of the whole Brazilian population.
Feldman says the biggest threat to the rainforest comes from influential land speculators.
It's very easy to understand that cattle ranching and traditional agriculture are not economically sustainable. Then what's the idea to go there and to destroy the forest? The idea is to concentrate land. It's a land problem.
For mining or?
No, in order to have the land.
Just have
It's land speculation.
A conservative element of Brazil's government adamantly maintains the country's right to control its own destiny and forest. But the head of Brazil's Environmental Protection Agency reflects a growing change in attitude.
De toda a sociedade do governo brasileiro.
We are already taking some important steps, such as requiring reports on the environmental impact of any agricultural or cattle-raising projects. We have stopped about 4,000 petitions for chopping down the jungle.
The change is in part because of worldwide criticism, in part a result of reality. The massive drive of city dwellers to the forest has slowed, for the word is getting back that the free land begins to die within 3 to 5 years after the trees are burned, and the peasant must then undergo another year or two of backbreaking labor to clear more land. The cattlemen are finding the same. Grasses are not sustained unless thousands of dollars of fertilizer are applied. The cattle business is proving to be inhospitable and unprofitable. Clara Pandolfo is the director of SUDAM, the Brazilian Agricultural Development Agency that once paid incentives to cattle ranchers who opened up Amazonian lands.
A SUDAM vem fazendo de modo muito.
SUDAM is trying very intensely to define a methodology which may allow for the use of the jungle in a rational way, because, pay attention, Amazonia is becoming the stage for an intense population growth. This population must have a survival option. If we do not offer them an option in which the jungle can be managed and consequently conserved, they will have to chop down the jungle.
While new questions are being raised about how man and the forest can coexist, the answers may be nearly as old as the forests themselves. The children of the rainforest are learning the old ways, knowledge of forest survival by their ancestors of thousands of years. This child's father is Oscar. Oscar and his wife farm the forest daily without cutting down trees. Sometimes climbing the acai tree for its fruit. Fruit that is then stripped and prepared for market. His wife tapped rubber trees for latex. All in all, dozens of plants are pruned, shaped, and harvested for a multitude of products.
What we're seeing here is a lot of acai.
Anthony Anderson, an American working for Brazil's Goldie Museum, is studying and documenting the variety and market value of Oscar's farming. Anderson, the scientist, is continually amazed by the diversity of each crop.
You get palm heart. It's Brazil's most important source of palm heart. You get edible fruits, which are used, it's a staple in the local diet. It's the juice from the fruits is used to make a beverage. You get feed for animals. After you've gotten through processing the fruits, they're fed to pigs and chickens. You get medicinal uses from the roots. The roots are used as a diuretic. The stems are used in construction, and the leaves are used to make basketry and other fiber products.
Anderson is already determined that Oscar and his family profit much more by farming under the rainforest cover than those settlers who destroy the forest for crops and cattle. About how much do you make per month?
1.200 a 1.300 por mês.
1,200 cruzados per month, which is approximately $400. This is during the dry season that he's making this money. Another tree, this is called...
Anderson is also involved in the production of uca-uba trees, one of Brazil's most important sources of export timber. Used as plywood, much of this product is exported to the United States. Rather than setting up large plantations, Anderson is encouraging natives to plant groves under the rainforest canopy. Work is also being done to develop a disease-resistant cocoa tree.
We've got the trees labeled here, and we have stakes demarcating a plot.
Those plots are part of an experiment to determine that selected clearing of non-commercial trees will yield more products than comparable plots in virgin forest. 10 of those plots will be monitored for a year. Labor costs and projected profits will all be considered. Anderson predicts this type of tree farming will be the more profitable. Anderson is also convinced that if settlers in other parts of the Amazon are convinced to adopt this procedure, large segments of the rainforest will be saved because this answer is based on profit. Hundreds of miles up the Amazon River in the heart of the rainforest is another connection between the trees and profit. The connection is not one you would ordinarily consider.
Believe it or not, these huge chunks of meat are fish. This is the Manaus Fish Market, recipient of one of the most fertile rivers in the world. And there is a link between these fish and the rainforest. When the Amazon floods, many of those fish move into the rainforest. They eat seeds, tree fruit, vegetation. Without the rainforest, they lose a large section of their food chain.
Survival also is the basis of a project underway for 10 years deep in the Amazonian interior. It is here that scientists conduct a study called the biological dynamics of forest fragments. It began after the government required all cattle ranchers clear only 50% of their land, and then allowed scientists to determine which 50% of the trees would be left standing. When one arrives at the vast devastation called cattle ranching, the fragmented forest stands like a tall surprise on the horizon. In this location, scientists have saved a 2.5-acre fragment and a 25-acre fragment. Dr. Rob Biergaard has been with this project since its beginning.
We want to understand how big should a patch of forest be if you want to preserve the ecosystem, the plants and animals, and all of the processes that are so essential to maintaining the diversity of the tropical rainforest.
The original idea was to simply isolate a large fragment of rainforest. But in this location, the study is of a specific 25-acre site and a 2.5-acre site. So far, research shows that very few species of insects, reptiles, birds, monkeys, or large predators such as jaguars remain. In fact, the studies show that if a forest fragment is isolated on all four sides by just 300 feet, birds will not cross that gap.
Even what you would get by just putting a road through is going to disrupt the ecology of the system, because you'll have certain pollinators that aren't moving. They won't cross that gap, and if they're not going out to that gap, the plants won't survive. The plants that are there will live out their life, but they won't be reproducing. So the hummingbirds that need the flowers for nectar, the birds that need the flowers for the fruits of these trees, will have to leave the reserve.
One of the more surprising revelations of this study is that when a forest fragment is joined by a corridor of trees to a large, undisturbed forest, the fragment regains its ecological balance. The idea behind the project is if the destruction continues, scientists hope to know how large a forest is needed to sustain remnants of what used to be Mother Nature's most incredible creations. Audubon Zoo curator David Anderson is working on a rainforest exhibit for the New Orleans Aquarium. At a base camp near the fragmented forest sites, he talked about the worldwide importance of just a few of the Amazon's creatures.
There's projects that are going on right now to see if there can be hybridization between catfish from Amazon with catfish in New Orleans area to make a better strain of catfish for the catfish farms. Rice has about 11 different predator insects now, so there are efforts now to try to find predators for the insects that are eating rice crops.
While scientists search for a way for the rainforest and man to coexist, another form of science is being applied to buy them time to do their work. Brazilian officials are using outer space to stop the killing of inner space.
Através do Landsat, o NOAA, o Cosmos.
We are working with Landsat, NOAA, and Cosmos satellites to spot areas where development in the forest is becoming a problem so we can take steps to stop it.
The enforcement effort is producing results. In September alone, the government issued more than $10 million in fines for illegal deforestation. And preliminary indications are that substantially less land was burned than in 1988. The irony is, while the Brazilians attempt to reverse a deadly trend, the United States continues to do exactly what we have accused the Brazilians of doing. 85% of America's old-growth forest has been destroyed over the years of our industrial development. The only major remaining pockets are located on our northwestern coast. Even now, thousands of acres of those trees are being destroyed. The trees are gobbled up by lumber mills who say they need bigger trees to stay profitable, or they are shipped to Japan as raw materials and sold back to American consumers as a finished product. Larry Tuttle of the Wilderness Society and other environmentalists say the old forest will be gone in 10 years.
Well, I believe that the statistics are that about 15% of the rainforest in Brazil and the Amazon region have been cut down, with 85% remaining. In the Northwest, it's the reverse of that. We've cut down at least 85%, maybe more, with only 15 or 10% of the forest remaining. I think it's pretty duplicitous to point the finger to another country when we are devastating our own forests at the rate that we are devastating them in this part of the region of the Northwest.
The U.S. Forestry Service disputes the rate of destruction, but admits that if cutting continues at its current rate, the old-growth forest will not last 50 years. With that destruction, a number of animal and plant species will disappear. The effect on man's atmosphere and quality of life are as yet unknown. beauty of a tropical forest is not indigenous only to Brazil. One of the most remarkable tracts is located in Costa Rica. The spectacular forest and the cooperative government have combined to attract scientists from all over the world. Scientists who are employing a number of diverse disciplines, all aimed at saving the rainforest. One of the centers of activity is the La Selva Preserve at the foot of Costa Rica's central volcanic range. Here, a consortium of universities share technology and living quarters. One of those schools is Tulane University in New Orleans. Tulane scientists have been at La Selva since 1986.
We're working on tree seedlings, very small plants. But it's understanding what affects survival of those plants at that stage where they're the most vulnerable that's going to help us to understand how to reforest and how to manage the forest on a long-term basis.
As Dr. Denslow records the inner workings of a forest, other scientists are following a different path.
Surprisingly, one of the best ways to study what's happening to the rainforest as it's torn down is literally the study of streams.
Victor Perez of the University of California at Berkeley is studying the link between deforestation and water quality, the impact of deforestation on fish.
By doing a comparison of a deforested stream, that the banks have been cleared a lot for cow pasture, that by looking at that stream and looking at this stream, which still has primary forest around its edges, we might be able to predict how the food sources have changed and therefore how the species of fish might change as a result of the deforestation.
We'll follow in your footsteps.
Okay.
How about that?
Don't just assume that I see everything, though.
Okay.
Watch where you put your feet.
Ardell Mitchell, a herpetologist with the Dallas, Texas Zoo, has some good advice considering the fact we're looking for a fer-de-lance, a snake, an extremely poisonous pit viper, almost 6.5 feet long. Mitchell and other snake experts have implanted a transmitter in the reptile, and the Geiger counter-like instrument and the handheld antenna are looking for the signal. The louder it beeps, the closer the snake. When the beep becomes very loud and the throat begins to tighten, there is only one way to walk.
Very carefully. It's a big snake, but it's invisible.
So invisible that at one point the antenna picked up beeps in every direction, which meant instead of walking up to the minefield, we had walked inside the minefield. If one ever needed evidence of how camouflaged the residents of the rainforest are, simply try to find this snake that is almost 7 feet long. Mitchell and his fellow workers will be following this snake for a year. The benefits of this research are not tied just to reptiles, but to the forest as a whole.
Whether it's a rainforest or a desert or any other ecosystem, the more we know about the individual components within that system, the more we're able to understand the whole system.
On a smaller scale, these Costa Rican forests reflect many of the same problems of Brazil. What was once a land literally covered with rainforest is oftentimes a land showing the effects of a growing population. The rainforest of yesterday often shadow burned out stumps and strawberry farms. If one looks closely, many of the slopes that once supported the rainforest are beginning to show signs of subsidence. Small potholes beginning to drop from under the grass. But all is not lost, for the Costa Rican government has come up with an answer that may stop the destruction.
And that answer is rather unique in that it would employ those who would destroy the beauty of this forest in order to save it.
The way we are addressing this issue is by giving employment to people in the protected wildlands. Train them as the research assistants for scientists, as park rangers, as tourist guides.
Incorporation of people into the rainforest economy is not just a dream or paper plan. The program is already in place. 27% of the entire country has been set aside for forest preservation. 3 separate categories of land use have been established. One is the absolute protection. A forest is a source of genetic materials, species preservation, and intellectual stimulation for scientists and students. 2, areas of forest where timber, fish, and medicinal plants can be extracted for profit without harm to the land. And 3, extensive exploitation of land for cattle ranching and coffee farming with little regard for biological diversity and protection. But the creation of a stable forest economy does not stop there.
We are creating a National Biodiversity Institute that will be doing a total survey of plants, animals, and species in this country. It will be cataloging all of this information. It will be at the center of reference where all the collections of this species are going to be deposited. Yes, and we are putting a lot of emphasis on the uses of the species.
Plants and animals.
Plants and animals and microorganisms.
The impact of what Costa Rica is doing is all the more dramatic when you consider the United States, which covers more than 3 million square miles, has less than 1/10 of its land in preserves. By contrast, Costa Rica contains only 19,600 square miles, but is willing to preserve more than 1/4 of its land.
And so there are answers, but the call for action would seem to be now. Because this is not just a story about beautiful greens gone past or crystal blues gone brown. This is a story about a huge planet turning small. What one does, the other one feels. This is a story linking the Ruggierios to tomorrow, today. This is a story of connections.
The Louisiana Land and Exploration Company
News Watch, a service of Cox Cable and WWL-TV. WWL-TV, Channel 4, New Orleans. Angela Hill,